Welcome to Strong, everybody. I am so excited to be welcoming our live panel here we're streaming here on YouTube, and we are also streaming live on Zoom. We've got a few people that we're just waiting to be joining our call, but for anyone joining us for the very first time, welcome to Strong. I'm so excited to be hosting this live event. We are going to have a live audience of teenagers and parents watching with us here on Zoom. And then of course we have our audience watching via our YouTube channel. For anyone joining Strong for the very first time, this is a panel discussion about real life conversations. We're talking about real life people and their real life stories. Tonight's focus is all about teenagers and parents and the communication challenges and the communication barriers that we might be facing while raising our teenagers. I think one of the greatest challenges that we see is one of the greatest challenges that we have, I think, in parenting is that communication barriers tend to block our ability to really understand each other. And I think sometimes we forget as parents that we want to be communicating with our teenagers, but also giving them an opportunity to express themselves and to understand that we're all on the same team. And I think we're going to talk a little more about what that means as we go in. Now, I know one of our panel guests, Almor, is trying to join us, but we will begin and hopefully he'll be able to join us in a little bit. For anyone watching in the audience, please remember to use that chat box. We will be looking at the chat box and trying to answer some of your questions as we come nearer to the end of the interview. And before we continue, I'd like to introduce everyone on the panel for us today. So joining us today, we have Lubna, who is based here in the UAE. She's zooming in from Sharjah. Lubna is a mother of a 6-year-old child and has joined us this evening because she works very closely with the youth and also would like to be part of this conversation, obviously to be preparing her for the years to come. Joining us as well, we have Maitha, who is 17 years old, also based in the UAE. She's zooming in from Dubai in the United Arab Emirates. Maitha is our 17-year-old voice of reason. She's going to be talking to us about what it's like to be 17, some of the things that parents may not understand about being a 17-year-old girl growing up in 2021. Of course, we also have Caesar, who is zooming in from Texas in the USA. Welcome, Caesar. Caesar is not only a parent coach, but he's also the parent to 6 children. Caesar has children age ranged from 12 years all the way up to 26. So Caesar's coming to us this evening with an insight on what to expect in the years to come, and also giving us an insight in that perspective of how things have changed being a parent of a teenager from a 26-year-old into now having a preteen of 12 years old. We also have 17-year-old Almor, who will be joining us hopefully soon. We'll be able to have a 17-year-old boy on the panel as well. Without further ado, my name is Maria Viteratos, and I am the founder of #Strong. I am here to use these social channels so that we can be having these conversations, real life conversations. How do we prepare the youth for the future? We allow them to be part of these conversations. And I think the best way to understand our teenagers and to build this communication is by bringing together parents and teens who are not emotionally attached to each other, but able to give us an insight. Welcome, everybody. Welcome to Strong.
Thank you, Maria.
So, I am so excited to have you all with us tonight. I have so many questions. I'm very conscious of the time. I am so appreciative, Caesar, for you to be joining us. I know it's early where you are in the US. So just before we begin, give us an insight to why you want to be here with us tonight, streaming live and sharing your perspective on the role that you play in our world today. Caesar, let's start with you. Why do you want to be with us tonight? Why is it important that you join this panel this evening?
Hi, everyone. Hello from Dallas, Texas. It is 10 a.m. here, so it's not so early.
But yeah, I think there are two phenomena that I like to discuss later on as the time goes through. You can ask me when, Maria. One of them is I've made so many mistakes with my older kids because I put too much pressure on them, and I didn't understand that when children are little, you need to exercise a lot of control, a lot of limits. But when they become teenagers, you need to start letting go of that and allowing them to be themselves. That's number one. And number two, um, we have a huge amount of pressure from social media today. Everybody's connected to the internet all the time. So I'm going to talk about the biggest thief for teenagers, and that thief is called comparison.
Thank you very much, Cesar. Thank you so much. Metha, you're 17. I bet there are a million more exciting things that you can be doing tonight, but you've decided to join us. Why is it important that you be part of this? And why is it important that we have this conversation?
It's important because we're going through it right now and we need to have insights and we need other people's opinions on things and um, seeing how people are going through it as well. It makes us more motivated to do stuff. Yeah, that's why I'm here. I love listening to people's thoughts and ideas.
Thank you so much, Metha. It's such a pleasure to have you. Lubna, you're a mom. You've got a 6-year-old child. We're going through a global pandemic. You must be exhausted at this stage of the evening. Why are you with us
Exactly.
tonight? Why is this an important conversation to be having?
This is very important for me because I myself have gone through a teenage age and I know how it feels. And I want other parents also to understand how teenager feels and how things you could make it better for them. And me also, I'm having a 6-year-old child, and when he's gonna grow up, I myself want to know more about it, like how I'm gonna deal with them, because right now I'm facing those problems even though he's just 6. It comes to them from now itself. So that's the main reason.
Thank you so much. So let's start with my very first question. I think it's a question that we rarely have time to really understand, and we rarely have time to be in conversation with our teens. And Metha, unfortunately, you're the teen on the panel. We're still waiting for Alnor to join us, so we're just gonna kind of put the spotlight on you for a minute and ask you, parents and teachers and any adults that we speak to, we all have a perspective. We all have this idea of what we think it's like to be a teenager. Some people have a very positive viewpoint, other people have very critical viewpoints. But what's it really like to be a teenager in today's world?
I believe being a teenager is truly a roller coaster. It's filled with emotions, challenges, and experiences. It's at times I would think, where do I stand? Am I an adult? Am I a child? I'm not good enough to be talking or engaging with adults, but I'm more well enough to know that I'm not a child and I don't have to like sit with them. But at the same time, it's like I'm mistreated and I don't know where I stand. I feel like time is moving so fast for us, and we've experienced everything all at once at this year and last year because of the pandemic. And yeah, um, that's how I think things are right now.
It is, and you said it. You said it completely correct. It was already challenging before this pandemic, and now the pandemic has kind of magnified how challenging it can be. So many misconceptions, would you say? There's so many ideas of what we think it's like. And most often, you probably get told this quite often, is when I was your age. And there's this
Exactly.
comparison. And I heard Caesar talking about comparison right at the beginning. So, Metha, would you say that what people assume teenagers are doing and what teenagers are experiencing would be the norm, or would you say that they really, really have a misconception?
It's supposed to be a norm. It's supposed to be normal for us to experience and make mistakes, and being compared to others. It's not really an ideal thought because everyone has a different experience in things, and we all go through everything, even if it's the same thing, but we all go through it a different way.
So challenging. Lubna, you have a 6-year-old. What's it like to hear Maitha saying some of the challenges that she's facing and some of the challenges that she's experiencing? What do you most often hear from other mothers that might have teenagers, and what are some of the conceptions or preconceived ideas that you believe about what it's like to be a teenager?
The teenage years are a time from, it's a transition from childhood into adulthood. So often teenagers have a very strong desire to be independent, and they feel very much overwhelmed by emotional and physical changes that they are going through. And I think parents should understand what teenagers are going through, because it's not easy for them. It's a time where they have a lot of fun, but at the same time, they feel that the parents have a lot of expectations with them, and then they start keeping hopes, and they don't let them be independent. It's mostly because parents are concerned about their safety. But some of the things that we usually hear, parents tell to their teenage, that you're mostly on your phone, you're addicted to social media, and when I was in your age, I did this, and I did like wonders, and you're so lazy, you just take selfies, and you kids are not good, not you kids are nothing. So these are kind of negative comments we parents sometimes give to teenagers, and you know we don't understand their feelings. So I think we need to be friends with the teenagers, and we need to have a very strong bond, not only when they enter into their teens. You need to have it from the beginning, from their childhood. You need to build that strong bond so that they trust you, and whenever they have any problems, anything, they discuss it with you. And if they discuss all this, whatever problem they are facing with, whatever feelings they have, if they discuss it with their teenage friends, of course it's going to be same, because even their friends are teenagers. So as a parent, we need to understand them, and we need to guide them correctly.
You're so right. I think there's a fine line, and I know that we're going to talk to Caesar about this as well. Is there's a real fine line between being friends with our teenagers and parenting our teenagers. And I heard you, Lubna, you were talking about some of the stereotypes, and I saw Mate that you were nodding as she was saying it. Comments like you're so lazy, you're always on your phone, teenagers are constantly taking selfies, really addicted to their devices. Those are some of the stereotypes. But as a parent, Caesar, what have you seen through the different ages of your children? Obviously, digital devices would be very different in the time of your 26-year-old than it probably is right now with your 12-year-old. But as a parent, how do you overcome some of these stereotypes that we might unconsciously being throwing at our teenagers, but at the same time, as a parent, you're trying, as Lubna said, to understand your teen and to let them feel like they can confide in you. But how do you overcome these stereotypes?
You need to
I'm
unmute
sorry,
yourself.
I was muted. I was muted. Yeah, just like Maitha was
Welcome,
saying. I'm
welcome
sorry.
to the life of live. I love it. I love it. I love it. These
Yeah.
things happen, and if you noticed, I'm like really super composed. We got this. Keep going, Caesar.
So yeah, I think Maitha mentioned of how a teenager feels trapped between childhood and adulthood. And the first thing we all need to realize, both teenagers and parents, is that the teenage years are very recent. It's an invention of modern society. It wasn't until the 1930s where an American psychologist used the term teenager for the first time. Before then, teenagers became, when somebody turned about 13, 12, 13, they became adults, and they started being treated as adults. So two things happened. One of them, responsibilities were given to them that let them feel worthy. Let them feel useful. I believe that one of the reasons why a lot of teenagers are depressed or they lack direction is because they're being treated as little kids. Everything's done for them. Nothing is expected from them, and they don't feel productive. So there's this time between 13 to about, now it's extended all the way into the 20s. People trying to find themselves in their 20s when they should have been adults long before. So as parents, I think we need to start giving them responsibilities, number one, but very important, number two, let them make mistakes. Because sometimes we give them responsibilities. That happened to me. That was one of the mistakes I made. I expected perfection from them, and that created tension. So the balance of good parenting, I've found that is learning how to be their leader and their friend at the same time. And when they're little, you control most of their environment, you dictate, you make all the calls. But when they become teenagers, you need to start letting go of the control, and you need to lead them through influence, through persuasion, not through immediate consequences. So that's anyway, I've said enough for now.
You make it sound seamless. I'm listening to you. Maita's smiling. I'm listening. Livna's intently listening, and I'm thinking, I have a 15-year-old, and I would like to think I'm really attuned and I'm very emotionally intelligent. I've done the training. I do this every day, but still there's moments when we come up to this barrier. So Caesar, like, as a dad, think of moments where your teen is totally rocking the boundaries and really stepping outside the boundary. How do you keep that communication open? How do you stay level-headed, and how do you ensure that they understand that you're trying to get them, but at the same time you're still a parent? And then, Maitha, we're going to come to you, and we're going to definitely get your perspective as well.
Yeah, so the first thing is I recommend for everyone, I don't know if y'all seen the documentary on Netflix called The Social Dilemma. Today we live in a world that is controlled by the biggest companies in the world, which is Google, Facebook. Facebook owns Instagram, Google owns YouTube, and their artificial intelligence is so advanced that every time that we use social media, I'm talking to parents too right now and to kids, you are being measured right now. They're creating an avatar to find out what you like. They're competing for your attention. So they're trying to keep you online as long as possible, and they feed you what you like. If you tend to think something about a certain subject politically or socially or whatever, they're going to give you more of the same. So parents, if you ever asked yourself, how can my teenager be thinking so different from me? Can they see what I'm seeing on my social media, on my news? No. They're being shown a completely different story. So that's number one to understand. Number two, we need to become parents. When your children are little, you're a policeman. If they misbehave, to answer your question, Maria, we give them an immediate consequence. We set a limit, right? We react to try to protect them. When they become teenagers, we need to stop being a policeman and learn to become a judge. For example, if a young man was asking a policeman at a coffee shop, "Hey, how is it illegal to have drugs and have possession of drugs?" The policeman would be like, "Why are you asking me? You got some in your car? Let's go check your trunk right now." Right? That's how a policeman will react. If a young person would ask a judge that, the judge is not trying to prevent the crime. He's trying to deal with it later, give a consequence later. So the judge would think, I might have to deal with this case in a month or in 2 months. So the key has been for us to learn to not react immediately, but to think strategically. Okay, what kind of behavior do I want from my now young adult that is living in my house under my authority, and what kind of privilege can I restrict, or what can or consequence that would encourage them to make better choices. But I would say, don't react, but think strategically with teenagers.
Again, you make it sound so seamless. Maitha, you've been on the other side. You've been in the side where you've probably had confrontation with parents. You've probably heard stories about friends who have had confrontations. I like what Caesar's saying about the judge and the policeman, and I can definitely see myself falling into those roles. Now, being a teenager on this process, and you're getting very, very close to being that young adult, you're entering that stage of your life where like Caesar was saying, back in the time, you would probably be living a very adult life, whereas now you're kind of in that in-between stage. What would you say to what Caesar was just saying about being parented differently as you grow older? Would you say that this is what you're seeing amongst your peers, or do you see that parents are still being very, very, parenting you the way that, say, Lubna might be parenting her 6-year-old?
Yeah, I believe that they should be like how Caesar said it should be, and I don't see that happening at the moment, but I kind of understand what they like tell me or confront me with, and there can be limits to like our culture and religion, but at the same time, it also affects your mental health, and we should be able to make mistakes because that's the only way we're gonna learn from it and experience it. And even if it's unpleasant or even if it's a good experience, we will fail and we will rise up. And yeah, I feel like Caesar's right about how we, like parents should parent us. And
It does sound very smooth and a very smooth transition. Lubna, would you say that being a parent to a young child right now and hearing what Caesar's saying about changing your style of parenting and becoming more attuned to how to be a different parent, would you say that you see that happening amongst people in your community and women and parents, in that community? Or do you see that parents are not really learning how to parent at different stages of their children's lives?
These days, I can see that most of the parents are trying to understand what their children are going through and how they should be managing them. But still, in some places, there are still some parents who are so frustrated with their own work, with their own lives, with their own jobs, that they do not understand what their child is going through, and they are not friendly with them. They are very strict with them, and there should be teens experience stress as well, and it can become a serious health issue for them. So I feel that still there are some parents who do not understand, but compared to what it was in before days, I feel that many parents are trying to change, and they are trying to be friendly with their children, and they are trying to understand, motivate them, support them. They are trying to be friends, and they build a parent and a child relationship, and they are trying to build trust in their children.
Thank you, Lubna. And as we're talking, I can see questions coming through the chat box. So there's a question that keeps coming, and it's about telephones and parents not being able to deal with anxiety, extreme anxiety with teenagers. Maitha, what would you say are some of the pressure points for teenagers when we talk about teen stress and teen anxiety?
It's taken so lightly. They don't really believe that every mental health is serious because in my culture it's taboo because we have religion for that, and we should pray and all things would get better. But we don't need assistance with trying to feel better when there's a religious path. I would love to have parents to take in and perceive the thought that being emotionally unstable is a high consideration that they might lose their child along the way, because they would think that the parents, they don't really want to get to know them and think about them, or like it's like they don't really care about what they feel inside, but just how they want to be seen or how people think that they're parenting us. And so there should be an open communication, and it can't have any judgments, because like we have to not find a way to get through this with our parents and feel like we're alone in this matter, because we live with them, we're under their roofs, and we still don't get what they want or how, like or the opposite, like likewise. But yeah, that's it.
And I think you have probably said something that I know I've heard very often from the young people that I meet on a daily basis is they feel very unheard. They feel that they're not really understood, and as you say, the anxiety can arise to an even more serious level. Caesar, this is a very, very sensitive topic, and I know one that's very close to my home as well. When we look at anxiety and young people, and as Maitha said, that level of extremity that it can get to, they say that the age group that we should really be concerned with anxiety and stress with young adults that can actually take a really bad twist is that 17 to 21-year-old. Now, I know, Caesar, that you have children in that age group. How do you see their anxiety in comparison to what you remember anxiety to be like when they were younger teenagers?
Yeah, there's a book that I really love. I'm going to answer the question by telling you the story by Canadian psychologist Jordan Peterson. He's an author as well. And he's got a book called 12 Rules for Life. And one of his chapters in the book talks about comparison. And he talks about how most of us in today's world, especially teenagers, you feel like you're not good enough. So that gives you anxiety, depression, suicide is going up. And the reason why that happens is because we create an unfair game in our own mind. First of all, think about this. You are the most critical, and listen to me, teenagers, you're the most critical person with yourself. You say things to yourself, and I'm saying this to parents as well. You say things to yourself that you would not say to other people because you would not be that mean to other people. But the reason why we do it is because we created an unfair game of comparison. You take one aspect of one person that you admire, then you take that aspect as the only relevant aspect, and then you compare yourself to that. So you compare yourself to someone's highlight reel. What about Instagram? What about a TikTok, Snapchat? You go to those social media sites, and you can look at people's perfect life. You look at their life, and even with their filters, people, what you're looking at is not even real. And you compare their reality that you think is their reality, which is really not because you don't know them, to your own reality. So one of the rules that Jordan Peterson says is compare yourself to who you were yesterday, not to someone's best today. And I think that's where we need to understand, parents, that people are dealing now, teenagers have much more information than we ever had. I was talking to a 94-year-old man one time at a pool. I took my kids to the pool this years ago, and he told me he was one of 17 kids. Okay. And he told me his story. And I was asking him how things were different then from what they are today. He told me that growing up, he learned to work. After he did his chores, he went to a farm nearby, and they would pay him a coin, and he would come and put the coin in a jar with everybody else. And then when he became 18, when he was 18 years old, he joined the army, and he was shipped off to war. And he came back, and they dropped him off this is before communications, right? No telephone or anything. They dropped him off in some farm miles from where he used to live. And he got a job at a farm and ended up living there, marrying the farmer's daughter, and having a very happy life. And I asked him, what do you think is different from back then to today? And his answer really blew me away. He said, people today know too much. We have too many choices. Last century, the term the American dream, I'm Mexican, but I live now in the US for years, was created. The American dream, the idea that you can have it all, that you can do it all. And that's a lie. You can't do it all. We're finite beings. The challenge, and I know I gave you a really long answer, but that we need to look at is you need to learn to discover who you are, your personal uniqueness, and not compare yourself to anybody else but yourself. And parents, when you talk to your kids, do the same thing. Don't compare them to other people, but compare them to who they were yesterday.
So I know that comparison is definitely something, and I can see it in the chat box as well. But Caesar, we want a closer view into your life, into your parenting with your children. So give us an example of, you know, an anxiety that your 26-year-old had faced, and one in comparison to what we're seeing right now with the pressures of, and Maitha, correct me if I'm wrong, there's this increase in pressure and exams, this increase, like you were saying as well, Caesar, this idea that we have to do it all. I think what I'm seeing more and more of are especially young girls seeing role models, very strong female role models, but nobody's really showing them the flip side of what they're doing. Nobody's showing them how other parts of their lives are still having to be maintained at a level, because women are still trying to do it all and make sure that not only do they do it all, but that they're incredibly good at everything they do. So take us in a little bit closer. You know, it's, and I think it's really great that as a parent coach, you might have a lot of tips for parents and teenagers, and that's very wonderful. But the one thing that I know for sure, and I see this myself as well, is sometimes we make it look so seamless as professionals. But what we really want to understand is, what's it like to be you, the human? Forget about the title, forget about what we know from our books. It's, what have you experienced as a parent that makes you understand what Maitha is trying to tell us tonight?
Yeah. So first of all, it's not seamless at all. Actually, I'm right now in the process of fixing some broken relationships that I have with my 24, with my 26-year-old, because I pushed them too hard, because I expected too much of them, because I try to control them too much in the teenage years. Have you guys seen a video on YouTube called The Backwards Bike? You need to go watch it. Backwards bike. This engineer designed a bike that instead, when you turn the handlebars to the right, the bike, instead of going to the right, goes to the left, and vice versa. And nobody could ride it, because your brain is wired to work in a certain way, right? So for me, small children were so easy to manage, because it's pretty much cause and effect, right? What do you do with a baby? You feed them, you change them, you make sure they're not sick. When they're tired, you put them down for a nap, you give them love and affection. Pretty easy. They become toddlers. People struggle with toddlers, but actually toddlers are pretty predictable. You give them an immediate consequence when they have an outburst of emotion, because they're experiencing their emotions, and they self-correct pretty easily. But when they become teenagers, that's where I was completely blinded until just recently, a couple of years ago. I realized, like, man, why are my older kids not talking to me? Why are they not sharing their struggles with me? What you just mentioned, Maria, about their struggle with their own anxiety or depression, or striving for achievement and success. And I realized that because I had put too many expectations on them. So something that I just recently learned from a strategy that I've been applying with my younger kids is from a book called Feeding the Mouth That Bites You. Have you heard the term, don't bite the mouth that feeds you? This book is entitled Feeding the Mouth That Bites You. So How to Raise Teenagers by Dr. Wilkins. And he talks about how you need to have a proactive strategy of emancipation. Like when the British Empire ruled over India, they wanted to rebel and against the British Empire. And Mahatma Gandhi told one of the rulers from India, one day you realize that we're going to be independent, right? And he told them, no, we have 300,000 troops here. And Mahatma Gandhi told them, yeah, but 300,000 troops cannot control 2 billion people or 1 billion people, however many people were there at that time. And what he realized, what the British Empire realized, was that they could not control them. So the last ruler of India from the British Empire was actually really loved by the Indian people, because he came and he announced, I am the last ruler over you. After me, you will be independent. I'm here to help you through a transition. That's what we parents need to do with our teenagers. So what I'm learning, and I've applied for this last year with my younger kids, is set up a list of areas that you will proactively and strategically give over to them to control. What areas? The language they use, the clothes they wear, the friends they have, the music they listen to, curfew, what time they're supposed to be home, what time they're supposed to go to bed, what they eat, even manners at the table. I used to be a real control freak about don't chew with your mouth open. Well, you can say that to a child, but you wouldn't. I wouldn't say that to Maria, and we went out to lunch, and she was eating with her mouth open. Why? Because she's an adult. I would respect her. Maybe I would say something differently, right? So I would recommend to all the parents listening to this, write down a list of all those things and decide when you're going to give them over to them. One of them is their room. It's one of the first things you can do when they're 13 years old. Instead of being nagging them about clean your room, just tell them, okay, this is your room now. I'm no longer going to check on you. Maria is freaking out when I'm saying this right now. I'm not going to check up on you, but now you're going to do your own laundry. Now, if your room is clean, you can put your laundry down here and I'll still do it for you. That's what my wife says. But if you don't keep it clean, then you're going to do your own laundry. And that's actually good for them to take over that area. So if you do that, and then by the time they're 18, that's my goal right now with my 12 and 13-year-old. By the time they're 18, there's no longer pressure about anything. They're completely free to choose to believe, believe in whatever they want. I'm not going to impose it upon them, but that opens up the door for communication. So we need to learn to realize that we need to learn to talk to kids, to our teenagers. And I'll finish with this. Like I said, it's not seamless. It's like riding a backwards bike. Remember the first time you learned to ride just a bike? We fell off a bunch of times and it was not natural. And remember the first time you learned how to drive? It was so difficult, right? You have to be thinking about where to go and the brake. And then I learned how to drive on a shift car with shifts, And then today you drive and you don't even think about it because it's second nature to you. There are two reasons why it's difficult. I'm going to say this for parents and also for teenagers so that you can have a little bit of compassion for your parents. Number one, most of the mistakes even that we make is because we love you and we just don't know how to do it. Number two, nobody taught us how to do it. So sometimes we smother you. We have expectations that are too high. We try to control you because no one taught us how to do it, but we do it out of a good heart, most of us. I'll stop there. I talked for a long time. Sorry, Maria.
Cesar, I love what you were just bringing in. A couple of key words came to me was compassion and the phrase, nobody taught us. Lubna, you are parenting a young child. Sometimes looking forward to being a teenager, or to being a parent of a teenager, we have all these incredible ideas of how we're going to do it. But like Cesar, you just said, and Maitha, you're experiencing, we don't go through training as parents into each stage of our children's lives. Nobody teaches us how to do it. And I think, though, nobody consciously teaches us, but we're learning unconsciously based on the role models that we had in our lives. And most of the time, would you agree, Cesar, that as the parent of a teen, that we are actually doing what we wish could have been done for us as teens? And I heard you saying the same thing, Lubna, about why you wanted to be here tonight. Would you agree, Cesar, that most of the parenting with teenagers is based on what we wish? Kind of what I heard you say too is, I'm now going through this experience of trying to regain relationships between my 24-year-old and my 26-year-old, and I'm trying to parent my younger two children differently.
Yeah, it's parents. The problem is we think we know. We think we know what they're going through, but we don't. I was just looking at the chat right now, and some people were saying, some teenagers were saying, talking about depression. It's the same. Yes, I actually told my parents about what I'm going through, and still they don't understand. I absolutely agree with that. There are rules that make no complete sense.
Lubna, talk to us about what we're just saying. Is anyone teaching you at this stage how to be a parent as your child is getting older? You know that those teen years, actually there's something called the pre-teen years, and you know that those those are coming really soon. Would you say that anyone's helping you along that path, or are you kind of learning as things happen to you?
Yes, of course. I think in every stage, every parent, there is someone or the other to tell us about what we need to do with our kids. And of course, we learn a lot from others because sometimes others have more ideas than us. So right now, my child is 6, but I know what teenagers go through, and I know adolescence is full of new challenges, and and they have a lot of anxiety, and most teenagers, they feel anxious. And also I was looking at the chat, what most of the teenagers are facing through. So I can see that most of them are having problems with people understanding them, because they have a lot of pressure on them, they have more challenges, they have new experiences, new opportunities, and as Cesar said, that we have a lot of expectations from them. And yeah, they are also looking at themselves from social media point of view. If you see that they are trying to become what they are, what they cannot become, like TikTok influencers are there, YouTube
Yeah,
influencers are there.
definitely.
So
Definitely. Now, Metha, would you say, because so Caesar was saying that, it's how we parent. Livna's also bringing in this idea of like the expectations that parents will have. But I want to kind of flip it now. Do teenagers have expectations of what they wish their parents would be like and how their parents could could parent them? Or do you see that teenagers are very open and kind of, they're willing to go with the flow with their parents?
I believe that we are willing to go and talk to them about things, and we want to be open with them and have trust with each other. And I believe that it might happen sometime, but it has to be like um, on our will, kind of. Like you want to be, how can I say this? Um, you want to be, you won't be something if you don't do it. Like you have to work
That's
for
true.
it, you have to do things and do that to get things together. And yeah, I feel like we should all consider things and move forward with this.
Because like you said, so much is different. I know it particularly in this part of the world where there's so much diversity, and you probably see this as well, Caesar, where you are. There's so much diversity, cultural diversity, religious diversity, even being from the same cultural background, there might still be family, societal diversity. And here we have teenagers coexisting in schools with all these different styles of upbringing. Matha, would you see that that can become a challenge as well? It's great to be mixing children and teenagers so that they could be becoming more cultured and really understand how diversity can enrich their lives. But do you also see that it can become a challenge for teenagers who are looking at their friends and saying, well, I wish my parents would talk to me that way, or I wish my parents could understand me this way?
I honestly feel that way, and we always try to fit in with people, even if we're different. We think that they have it easy because they have a chance to talk to their parents and they have a good communication from the start. Some people were left, and like for my parents, both of them work, so they're always out and we never see them. We're always at home. Um, it's just that like we need to cope with it better and talk even if it's like with teenagers, we can talk to each other about these things, and we need people that can show that they understand us. And it can be a competition sometimes. People want to be better than others, or they want to be the same as others. But in the end, it's better to be yourself and be unique and show that you're you.
It's so hard, isn't it, Metha? It's so hard being a teenager right now. It really is so hard. Just looking at the chat box, I can see comments coming in about Ila saying, my biggest fear is my family knowing about my personal life. And we have Amna saying, the biggest issue is the way that we're being treated. Some people are being treated like a child unnecessarily. I saw somebody else in the chat box writing about that, of course, there must be certain limits, but sometimes the rules are just too strict and it doesn't make sense. We have another comment in here again about being too strict. And I heard, Caesar, you said with your older children that you were too strict and you're now seeing the consequence of being too strict. My question is, and I'm going to throw that at you, Caesar, and Metha, maybe you can give us your input as well, is how do we know when we're being too strict? And how do we know when we're protecting them and trying to help them through a potentially really scary time in their upbringing?
Yeah, I mean, that's the last comment that somebody wrote there. That's the key. If you know that your teenagers don't want to talk to you about their personal life, you're being too strict. I mean, you're being too judgmental. You're judging. Have you ever, I mean, that's happened to me as an adult. I shared something with a friend, who was one of my closest friends, some person I was going through, and he didn't really listen to me. He just made a joke about it. And I thought, you know what? Screw you, man. I'm never going to tell you anything about it. And I actually told him that. We had a bit of an argument afterwards. I told him, you know, next time I struggle with something, the last person I'm going to talk to is you. And he felt terrible when he was like, oh, really? I didn't think so. I'm sorry. So I think we do that as parents a lot. We condescend because guys, we change your diapers. I mean, to us, you're our babies, right? But the problem is you become 12, 13 years old and you start having thoughts of your own. That's when parents, we need to learn to just shut our mouths and ask questions. And when
It's
they tell
so
you something
hard though,
crazy,
Caesar. It's so
what?
hard though, isn't it? It is just
Yeah,
so hard. I know, Lubna, you've got a child who's 6, kind of like what Caesar's saying, that you are taking care of this child, and every, survival is about mom and dad doing everything to keep this child safe. But then how do you know when you're being too strict as they get older? And Maitha, we're going to come back to you because I think it's important for parents to understand what the fine line is. So Lubna, with having a really young child and hearing what Caesar said, that sometimes, we just need to stop talking. How do you see yourself right now preparing your 6-year-old for what Caesar's saying, a time when they will have to be independent, and preparing yourself as a parent to kind of let go?
My 6-year-old, like from when he was like 2 or 3, he was very naughty. So I was having a very hard time with him, and honestly, I was very strict with him. And I used to always tell him to do this and do that, and then later on, as he was growing up, I realized that he's back answering me. He's responding the same way that I am talking to him. Like, if I scream at him, he will scream back at me. And then eventually I realized that this is not the way that we are going to deal our children, because eventually they are going to grow, and we are going to build that strong bond. So it has to be built from now onwards. So now I have changed with him, and I feel that when I talk to him as a friend, or if I talk to him in emotionally or something, he responds to me in a positive way. So this is how I am preparing myself and my child for a teenage age.
It's so hard. Okay, Maitha, back to you. How do we know? Give us a tip. Give us some kind of a clue as a parent how we can identify when we're just crossing the line and we're being too strict. Because Caesar said it, I'm going to reiterate it. I know Lubna has said it as well. Parents really genuinely want the best for their children. And sometimes we just don't realize that we might be crossing the line and suffocating our children by being too strict. I know I've been guilty of this as well. So give us a clue, Maitha. How can we tell when our teens aren't talking to us, when we haven't been a teenager for decades, when we really don't understand, we might be so busy working, and what we think we know about teenagers is really not what exists? How can we know when we've crossed the line?
So for example, when Caesar said how he has high expectations for his kids back then, that's the same for me. They always expect me to get higher grades or do things in a certain way, and I believe that I do things their way, and I'm always like trying to be the best for them. And sometimes when I ask them for my kind of leisure, for example, if I want to go out with my friends or anything, and they say no for no reason, it's like, why not? Because I've done everything that you asked me to. So I don't see a reason for me not to go. And they just like they don't even give an answer. They just say, yeah, you're not going, you're staying here. This is not happening. So I do want them to know that we should also like be able to be free with what we do and have the chance to live, you know, and yeah, and it's like sometimes emotionally draining because I'm doing my
Sorry, welcome to my world, technology. And anyway, here we are. Can you all hear me carefully?
Yes.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Sorry about that, Maytha. We kind of got you cut off there. Can you just finish that last thought that you were telling us about? Oh, it looks like Maytha, I can't hear you. I can't hear you coming through here.
Can you
There
hear
we
me now?
go. Yes, we can hear you perfectly.
Okay, so one sec. My AirPods died.
Welcome to my challenge as well. It looks like Apple, if you're listening, we need our AirPods to last a little bit longer. But just bringing it all together, I think tonight what I'm loving the most is that we're having this conversation. We're definitely going to need a part 3 to this conversation. We had part 1 in December. We're talking about part 2. We've got the same kind of conversation going. It was great to hear a father's perspective as well, and not just any father, a father who's also trained to be working as a parent coach. And it's also incredible to have Lubna, who's really the voice of a parent who has a younger child with so many hopes and aspirations for being the parent of a teen. And the one thing that I'm seeing coming through this chat box is this desire from teenagers for their parents to really understand them. And I'm seeing it through so many of these questions. And I think at the core of everything, and Maytha, you can jump in and correct me, but I think at the core of everything, children love their parents and parents love their children. And I think the at the core, everybody wants what's best for the other person, but it's the communication barriers that seems to be the challenge. So what would be your last hope? So this is where we're going to go around the table. One last hope that you wish, if a parent is listening to this, or if a teenager is listening to this, just one last hope that you would like to leave them with before we say goodbye for today. Let's start with Lubna.
Okay, so for parents, I would say that be friendly with your kids, motivate them, support them, and build that trust with them. Give your children responsibility, give them a chance to prove themselves. Listen to them because they are facing problems, even because they are studying, their educations are very hard and they have some other problems. For teenagers, I would say that at the same time, your parents really love you and they care for you and they are worried about your safety. So as Maria said, the communication barrier should not be there within parent and children.
Thank you so much, Lubna. Maytha, what would you like to leave us with tonight?
I'd like to make I'd like to be able to communicate evenly with them, and they could also share their troubles with me, and I would be able to help them out with it too, and tell them that I'm there for them as well. And we can also like teach each other mistakes and do things and experience and basically like be a friend to them, and also them to parent us and lead us to the right path. And yeah, and yeah, that's basically all.
Such a wise message from such a young, incredible young woman. Thank you so much. Caesar, what would you like to leave us with tonight? You've got such a great insight, so much wisdom, and so much experience. What can we leave remembering from your perspective?
So for parents, first, be humble, apologize to your kids, realize where you have failed, where you have maybe controlled them too much, speaking to teenagers, but also have a strategy and tell them from now on, I want to ask you for forgiveness. I made a mistake here, here, here. I love you. I want the best for you. And I want to set up a strategy where I help you become independent. By the time you're 18, you're completely independent. And for teenagers, I would like you to look at your fingers, at your fingertips. If anybody can put up your hands, everybody. Maria, put your hands up. Lubna, Maitha, you have fingerprints right there. Do you know that each one of your fingerprints is different from each one? And nobody ever in the history of the world has lived with the same fingerprints. Nobody right now in the world has the same fingerprints you have. And nobody in the future will have fingerprints like you have. You're unique. Stop comparing yourself to impossible ideas of success, perfection. Be kind to yourself and get to know yourself. And be patient with your parents, because your parents are just teenagers in grown-up bodies.
Incredible. Thank you so much, Cesar. So many questions coming through in the chat box. For anyone who feels that they would like to continue this conversation, please do join us on our Instagram account, where we will carry on having these conversations. I think the one thing that comes to my mind is it is so important for both parents and teenagers to be able to communicate. And I would rather that we communicate and express ourselves, even if we're a little bit upset and we're angry, because at least we're expressing ourselves. And I think the key to remember is that in an emotional moment, when we're either so angry or so upset or so hurt, it's almost impossible to listen to the other person carefully and really hear their perspective. I think the key to remember is to diffuse your emotion, take a minute, take a break, reflect on what was said, and then ask to meet again so that you can really understand each other. And I think sometimes, and Cesar, I know as a parent coach, you probably do this a lot. Sometimes we can't do it alone. Sometimes we can't communicate with our children on our own. Sometimes as teenagers, it's hard to communicate with our parents. We need somebody that can be there with us, to kind of be there to hold our hand through that conversation. So either get a parent coach, ask an aunt, an uncle, a best friend, a teacher, a counselor, but somebody that can help you and guide you all in that conversation. Thank you, everybody, for coming. I hope to see you all in February when we have our next Live with the Teens here at #Strong. Thanks for joining. I'll see you all again soon. Bye.
Thank you, Maria. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you,
Bye.
everyone. Bye.
Pleasure to
Bye.
be here.
Thank
Bye.
you.